Okay, now I've helped a ton of people relocate to northeastern Florida, but I've also had some people that moved here and they weren't exactly prepared for what Florida had in store for them. In today's video, I'm going to cover the top 5 common mistakes that I see people make when they're relocating to Florida. What's up, everyone? It's Thomas with Real Broker here in St. Augustine, Florida. And if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest here in northeastern Florida, make sure you reach out to me and my team. All we try to do is give you the information so that you can make an educated decision on what you want to do, which is buy, sell, or invest here in northeastern Florida. Also, if you're looking anywhere else in Florida, I do have some great referral partners all throughout the state. I can get you hooked up with a great agent that'll make sure that your best interests are their best interests. So in today's video, what I want to do is cover the 5 mistakes I see people making when they're relocating here to Florida. We're going to cover something as simple as taxes. We're also going to cover the weather. We're going to cover the neighborhood that you're moving to and a couple others. So make sure you stay tuned for the entire length of the video because I'm going to try to give you as much information as I can about these mistakes before you potentially make them. The first mistake I see people make is not researching the area that they're moving to in regards to hurricanes and the weather. Now, we all know that Florida is known to be the sunshine state. We have some great weather across the entire state of Florida, although it can be extremely hot at times. Now, that's known, right? You're going to move to Florida, 100% humidity, and it's going to be 90, 95 degrees during the summertime. But there's many places in the entire country that get those same exact temperatures and the same amount of humidity. And just to give an anecdotal story, I had someone that moved from the Pacific Northwest and they relocated down here to St. Augustine, Florida, and they actually had MS. So they didn't really know how it would affect them here, but the heat here apparently flared up her MS pretty significantly to the point where she was like, hey, I've lived here for 2 years and my MS has gotten progressively worse and I don't want to do it anymore. So she actually moved further up north because unfortunately her MS was flaring up pretty bad down here because of the high heat, the high humidity. But the thing that separates Florida from the rest of those areas is that we are a lot more hurricane prone than the majority of the United States. We have a lot of natural disasters that hit the state of Florida. And if you've never been a part of a hurricane or lived in Florida during a hurricane, you may not be ready for the effects that it makes you feel. So I don't want you to make the same mistake that I've seen other people make and not properly researching where is the least prone area if you are concerned about hurricanes. So luckily with the Market Distillery, they put together a map of the entire state of Florida that shows over the past 124 years here in the state of Florida where hurricanes have made landfall. And if you are concerned about a hurricane, you want to make sure you pay attention to this map here. Now, in general, most people know that the Panhandle gets hit a lot and South Florida gets hit a lot. So if you're in the Panhandle, you know that a lot of the storms come from the Gulf Coast. And then if you're in South Florida, you're going to get hit on both ends. You're going to get hit from the Gulf Coast and you're going to get hit from the Atlantic Ocean side. So you don't really have too much relief from either side when it comes down to hurricanes. But if we take a look at the map, and I'm going to take a look here on my phone, you can see that South Florida is getting the worst of it with the amount of hurricanes that make landfall. So you can see at the very tip of South Florida, we have Miami, you have the Keys. You're going to see that they're getting hit with a lot more hurricanes. The risk for hurricanes is much more in South Florida than it is for northeastern Florida or even central Florida when you're comparing the two. And the severity of these hurricanes are also much higher than what you're going to see in northeastern Florida. So I live in northeastern Florida. I live in St. Augustine, St. Johns County, and our severity of winds compared to South Florida are two different things. If you go to South Florida, everything is built with concrete block, impact windows. Because North Florida here, we don't get hit with the same level of hurricanes that South Florida does. We don't have to build to those standards. So our homes are actually wood frame homes built on a concrete slab for the majority of homes here. Now, will you find a block home? Will you find a brick home? Of course you will, but they're not the norm. It's not the average. You're going to see mostly wood frame homes here. And that's because we have an average wind speed much lower than that of South Florida. Our average wind speed here in northeastern Florida is around 120 mile per hour. In South Florida, it's going to be 160 mile per hour plus, and that's what they have to build to. So if you are worried about hurricanes, you want to make sure that you reference this data so that you know that you and your family are going to be protected. The second mistake I see people making is choosing the wrong location. Now, this seems pretty obvious, right? You don't want to relocate your whole entire life to a different state, maybe across the country, and choose the wrong area for yourself. And that could vary on a whole bunch of different things, but I'll give you two examples of where I've seen people make this major mistake, right? So here in St. Augustine, we're a huge tourist destination, and if you don't understand that, and if you don't know that prior to moving here, that could be a big shock to you. Many of the people that do move here are actually tourists first, and they're like, you know what, I kind of like it here. I kind of want to live here, live where people vacation, and they make that move. But if you're not prepared for the tourist attractions, the traffic, the problems that come along with tourism, that can make a huge difference in why you want to live here and not want to live here. So for example, here, if you moved to downtown St. Augustine and you didn't know that like during Night of Lights, which runs from November to the end of January, if you didn't know that that was really like the peak tourist season of our little town here, where the streets are filled with people walking all around, there's pretty much gridlock traffic, you're going to be pretty upset when that time comes around, because for you to get in and out of your neighborhood, if you're living in, let's say, downtown historic St. Augustine, you're living in Lincolnville, or maybe you're living in Uptown or Fullerwood, you're going to be affected by that traffic that is really centralized on that historic area in downtown St. Augustine. And to tie in with that, right, if you're looking at an area that like St. Augustine Beach, or if you're looking at Miami Beach, or if you're looking at Tampa, you're looking pretty much anywhere across the state of Florida, you are also going to have Airbnbs. So having a neighborhood and neighbors that you actually know, if you don't really know what that area is doing in terms of short-term rentals, you can move into a neighborhood and never know your neighbor, because it's just going to be a revolving door of people that are coming through just to visit the town. The next example I have of choosing the wrong location is more or less based on like choosing the wrong neighborhood, right? So a lot of the people that relocate to the area, sometimes they don't want to go towards a new construction neighborhood. Sometimes they want to go to more of an established neighborhood where it feels more mature. There's more grown trees around. There's no new construction around. There's no building around. So you're not having to deal with those type of issues. But the problem with that is when you move to a established neighborhood, most of the people that are already living there have been living there for a long time, right? So they already have their friend groups. Add another person to their friend group might mess up the rotation, you know, in terms of how many people they fit in the car. They've already got their kids who have their friends, and they have their parents or the friends' kids. All that kind of stuff makes it a little bit more difficult when you are moving to an established neighborhood, because it's almost like clicky in a very similar way to like high school was, where it's hard to get your foot in the door and make new friends in those areas because they're more established. They've been living there for a while. They already have their friends, right? If you move to a new construction neighborhood, you kind of get the opposite, right? Everyone that's moving to a new construction neighborhood is brand new to that neighborhood. So they're looking for that option to make new friends, whether they relocated within St. Johns County or somewhere within, you know, let's say you're anywhere in the state of Florida and you're relocating somewhere within your city because the new construction deal is too hard to pass up. You're going to move to that new neighborhood and you're going to want to know your neighbors. You're going to want to get out and make sure that you know who's to your left, who's to your right, who your kids are hanging out with, who their parents are. And you're going to make sure that you actually like these people. When you move to a new construction neighborhood, that's pretty much everyone there, because everyone in that neighborhood is brand new. So keep that in mind if you are thinking about relocating to Florida and you're kind of weighing the deal that you get with new construction versus a resale in that more established neighborhood. The third mistake that I see people making when moving to the state of Florida is not really studying the real estate market trends. So if you're watching this YouTube video, you're probably leagues ahead of most people because you're doing your research on the back end. You're on your computer trying to find out more information. The majority of people don't do that, which is kind of crazy to me, especially when a lot of these people are relocating across the country to come here. But nevertheless, every single market in the state of Florida is going to be different. And then there's different price points in different neighborhoods within that market. For example, here in St. Augustine, you can see that like West Augustine is taking a little bit longer to sell. There are more homes in the market here. There's a couple of new construction opportunities. So if you are looking at a resale, if you are looking at new construction, you have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of wheeling and dealing on what you're going to get. But if you look at like the luxury market here in St. Johns County, closer to Ponte Vedra, you're going to see that homes are selling for cash for multiple millions of dollars within a week or so. And that's because there's a mass relocation of extremely wealthy people to northeastern Florida from the likes of South Florida, from New York, from California. They're moving to those areas and they want to be in that luxury pocket. But when you're comparing prices to like California or South Florida or New York to northeastern Florida, the luxury market here is actually really affordable. So that market has a lot more demand than you would think. This all goes to show that, like, hey, depending on what you're looking at, what neighborhood, what city you want to look at, it's all different. And you really need to know what's happening in that neighborhood, what are the market trends, and what you're in for when you're looking at buying or selling in those areas. The fourth and probably the biggest mistake that I see people make is not really knowing the true cost of living here in the state of Florida. Just to cover a couple things, we all know that there's a big insurance problem here in the state of Florida. We're typically talking about homeowners insurance, right? Where it's difficult to get homeowners insurance, where the cost of homeowners insurance is really expensive. Flood insurance can be very expensive because you're in a flood zone. Those are actually some big drivers as to like what you may not know. But you also may not know that car insurance, we're actually one of the most expensive areas for car insurance compared to the rest of the country. And that's because we have a lot of uninsured motorists in the state of Florida. For whatever reason, I don't know how you get around without having car insurance. I wish I didn't have to pay it, but apparently people make that choice consciously, and it happens all over the state of Florida. So our cost of insurance here in the state of Florida for homeowners insurance, for flood insurance, for car insurance is actually much more expensive than the rest of the United States. So yeah, you may see some more affordability in home pricing depending on where you're looking, but if you factor in the cost of insurance and taxes, that's actually going to bring you up to probably about the same place, if not more expensive than where you're relocating from. And since I just brought up taxes, this is actually a really big point that I need to make, is most people don't understand how our taxes are calculated here in the state of Florida. So here in St. Johns County, our taxes are calculated based off of the just market value of the property. Now, the market value and the taxable value are typically two different things, but they pretty much go off of sales price, and taxes get reassessed every single year. But a triggering event to reassess taxes is when you transact on a property. So if you buy or sell a property, that is a triggering event for the property appraiser to reassess your taxes. Now, here in St. Johns County, on average, our taxes are about 1.4% of the purchase price. So if you're buying $1 million house, your taxes are going to be around $14,000. If you're buying a $500,000 house, they're going to be around $7,000. But the biggest mistake I see people making is they're basing their taxes and what their monthly payment is going to be, or their annual payment is going to be, off of a previous owner's tax history. So the one thing we have here in the state of Florida is the homestead exemption, which gives you a $50,000 discount on your taxable value of your property. It also caps you at your taxes being raised at a maximum of 3% year over year over year. So let's say you're buying a $500,000 home here in St. Johns County, where it's around 1.4% of your purchase price is going to be your taxes. So like we talked about before, it's going to be around $7,000. If you get the homestead exemption, this means that you're counting this home as your primary residence and that you're going to get that $50,000 discount on your taxable value, but you're also going to be capped at any increases year over year at 3%. So that $7,000 amount can only go up 3% year over year over year as long as you have the homestead exemption on there. Now, the problem is that people base the taxes off of the previous owner. So let's say that someone bought a home for $250,000 10 years ago. Well, the taxes are pretty much, if you're looking at their history, it's pretty much based off of that $250,000 mark. So 1.4% of $250,000 is going to be right around $3,500 for the year. So their taxes are based off that $3,500 amount with a 3% increase over the 10 years, right? So they've really crept up little by little by little. So when you're looking at their tax value based off of a $250,000 price point in today's market, it's going to be a big adjustment. So the problem is a lot of people use lenders that are licensed in a whole bunch of different states. They're not exactly focused here in the state of Florida. So they could make that mistake where they're just going to pull the old taxes and they're just going to put it onto your pre-approval. And it's going to show that, oh, hey, we're going to escrow this amount. We're going to put all this into an account. We're going to pay your taxes for you. And then a year later, when your taxes get readjusted, you're going to get a huge tax bill that you weren't ready for. And you're going to say, what happened? Well, these people were paying only this. Well, it doesn't matter because it's based off of market value. So that's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make. And it's also caused people to move because they weren't aware of this. And the fifth mistake I see people make is that they don't have a team for making this transition happen, right? So like I mentioned before, you need to have a good lender that is licensed here in the state of Florida that knows what they're doing and knows how taxes work, how the insurance game works, all that kind of stuff to put it together. If you're using someone, that is licensed across a whole bunch of different states, that's great. They have a big net to catch all these different leads in. They're not exactly going to be on the ball when it comes down to what's going on here in the state of Florida. So you want someone that is an expert here in our local area. You also want an insurance carrier that is local, that knows what's going on, that is going to be able to get you an accurate quote for your insurance so that you don't get into trouble, you don't get into deep water, let's say, especially here in the state of Florida, when it comes down to figuring out how much you're going to have to pay, what your flood insurance is going to look like, all that kind of stuff. You want to make sure you know all this kind of stuff before you get locked into a contract. And the third thing is you want to make sure you have a local realtor that knows the market trends. There's realtors that sell the entire state of Florida. Makes no sense to me. It's honestly, it should be illegal because there's no way that I know what's going on in Miami, right? But the good thing is I know a great realtor that does. So if you're looking in St. Johns County, I'm going to be your guy. If you're looking in Jacksonville, Flagler County, Putnam County, I'm going to be your guy. But if you're looking in Tampa, if you're looking in South Florida, you're looking in the Keys, I'm going to have a good referral partner for you, for a local expert that knows everything and all the pitfalls of what we just talked about. So guys, to put a bow on it and wrap this thing up, those were the 5 mistakes I see people make when moving to the state of Florida. If you have any questions about what I just covered here today, make sure you reach out to me directly, whether that's a call, text, or email. Like I said before, all my team tries to do is give you the information so that you can make an educated decision. I'm not trying to hard sell you on anything. I'm not putting a gun to your head saying, buy this now. We're giving you the information so that you can make a decision on what you want to do, which is buy, sell, or invest here in Florida. Until next time, guys.